In the high-stakes, hyper-stratified world of late Victorian London, a man's reputation was not a vague social asset. It was a tangible, fragile currency. It dictated his military rank, his financial credit, his marriage prospects, and his standing before God. To destroy that reputation was to execute him socially. In June 1891, the Lord Chief Justice's court achieved something entirely unprecedented in the annals of British history. For the first time in over 400 years, the heir to the British throne, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, was legally forced to stand inside a witness box before a public gallery. He was not there to defend the geopolitical interests of the British Empire. He was there under oath to testify about an illegal secret card game played behind the closed doors of a millionaire's country estate. The courtroom air was suffocatingly tense. The public benches were packed with dukes, duchesses, and foreign diplomats who had bribed court officials for a seat. On one side of the aisle stood Sir William Gordon-Cumming, a highly decorated lieutenant colonel of the Scots Guards, a man of immense wealth, and an elite aristocrat who claimed his honor had been systematically murdered by his closest companions. On the other side sat the highest echelons of high society, desperately trying to suppress a conspiracy of silence that had spun completely out of control. The formal accusation was simple yet socially fatal: cheating at baccarat. But the true crime was not merely the alleged fraud over a handful of gambling chips. It was the ruthless, systematic execution of an elite cover-up designed to protect a reckless royal reputation, a shadow operation that ultimately blew up in the faces of the British establishment. How did a private weekend party among the Empire's elite devolve into a legal war that threatened the stability of the British monarchy? If you are fascinated by global true crime told like a documentary, consider subscribing to Enter the Crime. Because to understand how it got here, we have to go back. To truly comprehend the volatile, toxic nature of this scandal, one must first understand the strict, unforgiving social ecosystem of Great Britain in September 1890. The setting for this narrative is Tranby Croft, a sprawling, newly constructed palatial country home located in Yorkshire. The estate was owned by Arthur Wilson, a massively wealthy shipping tycoon. The Wilson family belonged to what the old aristocracy derisively called the new money class. These were the industrial titans of the Victorian era, men who had amassed unimaginable fortunes through manufacturing, shipping, and trade. However, in 1890, money alone did not guarantee entry into the highest tier of British society. To solidify their status, the new money class had to buy their way into the social circle of the old money landowning gentry. And the ultimate prize, the absolute pinnacle of social validation, was securing the presence of the Prince of Wales at your private estate. The Prince of Wales, known to his intimate friends simply as Bertie, was a man profoundly obsessed with luxury, aesthetics, and high-stakes gambling. His lifestyle stood in sharp, rebellious contrast to the austere, deeply puritanical, and mourning-heavy reign of his mother, Queen Victoria. While the Queen demanded moral sobriety from the nation, the Prince of Wales surrounded himself with an elite, fast-living cohort known as the Marlborough House set. This group was defined by its love of horse racing, theater, opulent dining, and illicit card games. Among the elite guests handpicked to entertain the prince during his weekend visit to Yorkshire was Sir William Gordon-Cumming. Gordon-Cumming was the quintessential alpha male of the late Victorian era. He was a celebrated war hero who had fought with distinction in the Egyptian and Sudan campaigns. He was the chief of an ancient Scottish clan, the owner of a massive 40,000-acre estate at Altyre, and a baronet of the realm. He was also a close personal friend and hunting companion of the Prince of Wales for over 10 years. Gordon-Cumming was a man of immense physical presence, tall, handsome, fiercely proud, and notoriously arrogant. He assumed his aristocratic pedigree and military record made him completely untouchable. The underlying tension at Tranby Croft was quietly building from the very moment the royal train arrived at the local station. The Wilson family was operating under an immense amount of psychological stress. Every meal, every servant's gesture, and every hour of entertainment had to be perfectly calibrated to avoid boring the future king. If the prince was bored, the host's social ambitions were dead. To keep the prince amused, the evening activities always turned to gambling. But here lies the fundamental hypocrisy of the era. Under British law, specifically the Gaming Act of 1845, baccarat was classified as an illegal game of pure chance. It was strictly unlawful to play it for money anywhere in the realm, including private homes. Local magistrates routinely raided working-class pubs and back-alley dens for hosting far smaller gambling operations. The Prince of Wales, however, considered his social circle entirely above the laws of his own empire. He traveled from country house to country house with his own personal, custom-made leather baccarat set. The gambling counters were meticulously crafted from solid bone, dyed in various colors to represent massive financial stakes, and stamped clearly with his own royal feathers crest. The psychological baseline of the players on that fateful weekend was incredibly delicate. The Wilson family was desperate to please. The prince was desperate for amusement and dopamine. Sir William Gordon-Cumming was completely secure in his position as a high society favorite. It was a volatile mix of royal entitlement, desperate social climbing, and military arrogance. In this hyper-fixated environment, the slightest deviation from the unwritten code of aristocratic behavior would trigger catastrophic structural failure. The first warning sign appeared on the very first evening, September 8th, when it was discovered that Tranby Croft did not possess a single table wide enough to accommodate a proper royal baccarat game. The staff was forced to hurriedly push together several mismatched card tables, covering them with a makeshift green cloth, a chaotic, uneven physical foundation for what was about to unfold. At approximately 10:30 p.m. on the night of September 8, 1890, after a multi-course dinner washed down with vintage champagne, the house party gathered in the drawing room. The mismatched tables were aligned, the candles were lit, and the Prince of Wales took his designated seat as the banker. In baccarat, the banker controls the primary funds, dealing cards to two sides of the table. Players place their bets on whether their respective side will beat the banker's hand by reaching a total value closest to the number 9. It is a remarkably fast-paced game. Because huge fortunes can be won or lost in a matter of seconds, the game relies entirely on absolute transparency and the unyielding honesty of the participants. As the first round of cards left the leather shoe, a young man named Arthur Stanley Wilson, the 22-year-old son of the wealthy host, sat immediately adjacent to Sir William Gordon-Cumming. As the cards were flipped, young Arthur noticed something highly unusual about the physical movement of the war hero's hands. Gordon-Cumming was utilizing a highly specific, deceptive technique known in gambling circles as coup de vingt, or the 20-stroke. This method required the player to place a relatively small bet on the table, cover the chips partially with their hand, wait for the banker to reveal the cards, and then surreptitiously add more chips to the pile if the hand won, or withdraw chips if the hand lost. Young Arthur Wilson completely froze. He could scarcely believe what his eyes were telling him. He looked away, shook his head, and focused back on the table. On the next deal, he watched Gordon-Cumming's fingers with intense scrutiny. According to his subsequent legal testimony, he saw it happen a second time. Gordon-Cumming had allegedly pushed his chips forward across the line after a winning hand was declared, deceitfully increasing his payout from the royal banker. Nauseous with panic, young Arthur leaned over and whispered his horrific observation to his close friend, Berkeley Levitt. Levitt was a 23-year-old subaltern officer in the Scots Guards, the exact, elite military regiment that Sir William Gordon-Cumming commanded as a high-ranking lieutenant colonel. Levitt's position was instantly terrifying. If he accused his commanding officer of cheating, his military career would be instantly annihilated by the army command for insubordination. Leavitt told Arthur to remain completely quiet and looked over to watch for himself. Within minutes, Leavitt also witnessed the decorated baronet slide his counters forward onto the winning line. The psychological weight of this discovery was immense. A young officer and the son of a shipping tycoon had just caught a baronet of the realm, a personal friend of the future king, engaging in systematic, low-level financial fraud directly in front of the Prince of Wales. The stakes were far higher than a simple card game. If the news leaked that the prince was banking an illegal gambling ring where his own inner circle was cheating, the prestige of the entire British monarchy would face an existential crisis. The next evening, Tuesday, September 9th, a deliberate psychological trap was laid inside the drawing room of Tranby Croft. Young Arthur Wilson had privately informed his brother-in-law, Lycett Green, and his mother, Mrs. Mary Wilson. The family decided that a single eyewitness was not enough to bring down a baronet. They expanded the circle of secret observers. 5 separate individuals, Arthur Wilson, Lycett Green, Jack Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, and Berkeley Leavitt, now sat around the makeshift green table with their eyes hyper-fixated on the movements of Sir William Gordon-Cumming. The trap worked with agonizing precision. Throughout the second night of play, the 5 observers independently noted that Gordon-Cumming was continuing to alter his bets post-deal. He was pocketing illegitimate winnings, completely oblivious to the fact that 5 pairs of eyes were tracking his every finger. He felt completely safe, wrapped in the warm blanket of royal favor and aristocratic immunity. The crime itself was entirely bloodless, conducted with quiet, practiced hand movements over a green baize cloth, surrounded by the elite scent of expensive Turkish tobacco, aged brandy, and polite laughter. Yet, to the Victorian ruling class, cheating at cards was deemed a far more heinous offense than cold-blooded murder. A murderer merely took an individual life. A card cheat systematically destroyed the unwritten, foundational social contract of aristocratic trust upon which the entire governance of the British Empire relied. If gentlemen could not trust each other at play, they could not trust each other in Parliament, in the military, or in business. By midnight, the secret was burning a path of destruction through the guest rooms of the mansion. And that's when the real nightmare began. The initial theory developed by the senior members of the house party was that the entire crisis could be handled swiftly, quietly, and completely outside the jurisdiction of the British legal system. On the morning of September 10th, the Wilsons took their findings to Lord Coventry and General Owen Williams. They did not call the local police. They did not notify a magistrate. Instead, they convened a secret, ad hoc tribunal inside the smoky billiard room of Tranby Croft. Here is the first major narrative reversal. The amateur aristocratic investigators thought they had secured an open-and-shut confession when they finally confronted Gordon-Cumming. When the charges were leveled against him in private, the war hero erupted in fury, vehemently denying the accusations. However, under intense psychological duress, Gordon-Cumming did the absolute unthinkable. He signed a formal, secret covenant promising to withdraw from society and never play cards again, in exchange for the eternal silence of the guests. What your viewers are looking at in this moment is the historic birth of a mechanism that heavily shapes modern society today, the Non-Disclosure Agreement, or NDA. This 1890 covenant was the literal structural ancestor of the hush money settlements and corporate NDAs used by modern tech moguls, politicians, and high-profile executives in the 2020s to bury misconduct entirely outside the public legal system. Just as the Prince of Wales used his signature to construct a wall of silence around his illegal activities, modern elites use financial and legal leverage to ensure their private indiscretions never see the light of day. The inner circle fully believed this shadow contract had solved the problem. They were completely wrong. At this critical stage of the investigation, who would you suspect? Do you think a wealthy war hero would truly risk his life for a few £100, or was he the victim of a coordinated frame-up by an insecure, new-money family eager to secure the ultimate favor of the crown? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The amateur investigation quickly stalled and disintegrated because the entire structure of the agreement relied on absolute, flawless secrecy. But in the hyper-gossipy, cutthroat world of Victorian high society, secrets were the ultimate form of social currency. Investigators and royal handlers soon had to filter through a massive volume of private letters, society telegrams, and whispered rumors circulating through London's elite gentlemen's clubs. The historical lesson here mirrors our modern digital landscape perfectly. Long before the invention of Twitter, Reddit, or viral whistleblowing TikToks, the Victorian elite had their own highly effective, offline version of an algorithmically driven cancel culture leak. The firewall of silence held for exactly 3 months before anonymous letters began arriving at military barracks. The leak was catastrophic. The story was out. Sir William Gordon-Cumming was a documented card cheat, and the future King of Great Britain had actively signed a secret treaty to cover up the crime. This leak led directly to the second massive narrative reversal. The physical existence of the signed covenant seemed to be absolute proof of guilt, until the disgraced war hero took a nuclear legal option. Realizing that his military career was effectively dead and that he was already being blacklisted from London society despite his signature, Gordon-Cumming decided he had nothing left to lose. He broke the covenant and filed a massive civil lawsuit for slander against the Wilson family and the other observers. By taking this step, he did what the royal family dreaded most. He dragged the entire affair out of the comfortable shadows of country estates and directly into the public legal system. This triggered the third and most damaging reversal for the British establishment. The Crown's entire damage control strategy was to protect the monarchy from public scrutiny. But when the civil trial commenced in June 1891, that strategy completely collapsed. The plaintiff's legal team issued a formal subpoena to the Prince of Wales. Under the constitutional laws of England, the heir to the throne could not refuse a Supreme Court summons. For the first time in modern history, the future King of England was forced to sit in a public witness box, subjected to aggressive, humiliating cross-examination about his personal vices, his illegal gambling habits, and his signature on a secret cover-up document. The carefully managed illusion of royal infallibility was shattered in a single afternoon. To understand the deeper, underlying truth of this case, we have to look past the velvet cloaks and the royal titles. We have to analyze the perpetrator's alleged mindset based strictly on the documented court transcripts. Sir William Gordon-Cumming was a man who possessed everything the Victorian world could offer: immense wealth, ancestral estates, and military glory. Why would a man of such stupendous fortune risk his entire life to cheat for a few petty gambling chips over a weekend? But while investigators and society psychologists analyzed his behavioral patterns, a hidden piece of evidence was about to surface that changed everything about how the public viewed the psychological dynamics of the courtroom. The hidden factor driving this entire scandal was not financial desperation. It was deeply, profoundly psychological. It was the thrill of social dominance. Documented court testimonies reveal a criminal mindset that directly explains the mechanics of modern high-profile fraud. Gordon-Cumming suffered from a profound, narcissistic sense of psychological invulnerability. He didn't cheat because he needed the chips. He allegedly cheated because he believed he was grand enough to get away with it right under the future king's nose. This is the exact same psychological pathology we observe in modern society's most notorious romance scammers, cryptocurrency grifters, and elite white-collar criminals. The compliance mechanisms they exploit rely entirely on their social standing. They leverage an aura of absolute prestige so intense that victims find it psychologically impossible to challenge them in the moment. Furthermore, the entire legal collapse of this investigation highlights a massive evolutionary milestone in forensic science. The 1891 trial was completely gridlocked by the profound flaws of human eyewitness anxiety. 5 people swore they saw the fraud. Gordon-Cumming swore they didn't. There was no objective truth. This specific historical failure is precisely why modern society has developed highly sophisticated forensic tracking systems. Today, the modern gambling industry and legal systems no longer rely on the biased, panicked eyes of aristocratic onlookers. They utilize overhead multi-camera arrays, automated digital table logging, and artificial intelligence trained to flag micro-movements of fraud instantly. The chaos of Tranby Croft catalyzed our modern obsession with replacing fragile human testimony with absolute, unblinking surveillance data. The media narrative capitalized on this psychological fracture instantly. The working class and radical press did not see a rogue soldier. They saw a corrupt, decadent, lazy aristocracy that operated completely outside the laws of the land. The headlines fiercely painted the Prince of Wales as a degenerate gambler who was actively corrupting young military officers and industrialists, exposing the deep, volatile class resentments that were bubbling under the surface of the British Empire. The psychological breakdown of the scandal revealed that the true vulnerability lay within the British justice system itself, which was being visibly twisted and pressurized by the Crown to secure a very specific, face-saving verdict. The sensational trial lasted for 7 agonizing days. Heavily influenced by the judge's highly biased, institutional direction, the jury deliberated for a mere 10 minutes. They found entirely in favor of the defendants. Sir William Gordon-Cumming lost his civil lawsuit. The aftermath of the verdict was immediate, brutal, and completely asymmetrical. The very next morning, Sir William Gordon-Cumming was summarily dismissed from the British Army, his decades of military service instantly erased. He was formally ejected from every gentleman's club in London and completely blacklisted from high society, turning into a social ghost overnight. He retreated to his remote, isolated estate in Scotland. For the remaining 39 years of his life, Gordon-Cumming lived as a reclusive country gentleman, never again setting foot inside London high society. The Prince of Wales survived the legal ordeal, but the institutional and cultural legacy of the scandal was permanent. The baccarat scandal fundamentally altered the relationship between the public and institutions of power, providing modern society with its definitive blueprint for institutional crisis management and brand containment. When the scandal broke, the establishment recognized that the institution itself was at risk. Their response established the exact PR playbook that modern royal families, global corporations, and political parties still execute flawlessly in the 2020s. Identify the compromised individual, cut them away from the inner circle with clinical precision, construct a narrative that pathologizes their behavior as an isolated anomaly, and weaponize the judicial or corporate apparatus to ensure the institutional hierarchy remains completely untouched. Gordon-Cumming was not just a disgraced soldier, he was the prototype for the modern institutional scapegoat. Sir William Gordon-Cumming maintained his absolute, unyielding innocence until the day he died in 1930. To his final breath, he insisted that he had never cheated a single soul at cards, and that he had been ruthlessly sacrificed as a social scapegoat by a cowardly inner circle to save the fragile reputation of a future king.